In this edition of NewsX Roundtable, we will take up the topic of Digital India as conceived by Prime Minister Narendra Modi. And on this subject, I am being joined by Sanjay Puri, Chairman, NewsX, Mohan Ananda, Chairman, Second Opinion, and Sanjay Srivastav of GenPact. Let me begin this conversation with you. What does Digital India mean for an average Indian back home?
My feeling is if you have the real Digital India, the quality of life can be improved significantly.
How? Can you elucidate that with some examples?
For example, what's happening in India today, it's a highly bureaucratic system, and some vested effects of the British rule. We still have these paper piles. You go to a government office, you see people carrying paper from one office to the other office. Everything gets too much time. So if you have information technology in the system, which they are trying to do, the life would become very, very easy.
Sanjay, how can it be a tool to empower poor people? Mobile platforms and telephony means multiple things for many people. For some it's entertainment, for some it's a utility device. But the Prime Minister talks about it as a tool to empower poor people and increase efficiency. How can that happen?
Well, look, I think with mobility, the notions of transparency, governance, and compliance come into play, because you've got the ability to have information and compute power at the ends of the network infrastructure, and thus you get participationary engagement. I think that's a big thing. Frankly, I actually think there's even a larger opportunity with Digital India to broaden the point, which is for the common person, it's the ability for India to play on a much larger stage, on the world stage. And when I say that, what I mean is, one of the things we're finding digital does, and you look across the globe, you look at companies as ecosystems, is it provides an inflection point to jump ahead, to redesign for the future. And I think for India, and for the average person in India, this represents an opportunity for the country to actually leap forward and, if you will, join and get ahead on the world stage in terms of contributory power, economic potential, which then in turn flows back to the common person.
No, because the Prime Minister, Sanjay, is going to go to Tesla, he's going to go to Google, he's going to do a town hall. But what does it mean for an average Indian? A lot of people would say, yes, it's good atmospherics, it's good TV, you might be able to connect with a younger audience, the aspirational India. But in terms of tangibles, what does it mean?
See, I think when you look at, you talk about an aspirational India, what does a poor person want? He wants his children to not follow the path that he has followed. How will that change? If the girl child, through a mobile device, can get educated, today you can take courses that have been taught in Stanford or Wharton, etc. Let's say it opens up an avenue of education. That's an aspirational India. If Prime Minister Modi can achieve that somehow, because that involves bandwidth, that involves all kinds of things. But I think education is a very important aspect of what it's going to happen. But also look at the farm to fork. Information is power today. When you look at a farmer, by the time his product comes out to the marketplace, it's gone through at least 6 different levels of distribution. So he might be producing something at this point. You talk about farmer suicides. Give him the market price. Let him sell right to the customer directly. And so those are the things that we need to be investing when we look at Digital India. Tesla makes a fantastic car, but the average price of a car is $100,000. I don't think too many people in the villages are going to run out there, but he probably is looking at the power pack, the energy saving of Tesla. But I think education, information to the villagers, etc., prices on farm produce, those are the things where we'll have gains.
But then there are other applications of Tesla which can be used?
But I think education, information to the villagers, etc., prices on farm produce, those are the things where we'll have gains.
But then there are other applications of Tesla which can be used?
Yeah, Tesla has a big, they've set up in Vegas a huge power pack that they've come up with. And I think that's one of the things he's probably going to discuss with the Tesla folks, Elon Musk and others, because energy is again a huge, huge issue in India. And finding different ways of building alternative energy sources, which this could be something that is incredible, which could actually power an entire village, what Elon Musk has built. So I think those kinds of dialogues will happen, not just about digital India, but also power India.
Sanjay, there is also a raging debate back home on the issue of net neutrality. And this net neutrality debate has kept a pace with the digital India debate simultaneously. These are two debates simultaneously happening back home.
Neutrality is a very important aspect. Intellectual property is a very important aspect. So those are things that India has to absolutely adhere to. If that doesn't happen, these meetings are not going to be as valuable as they should be, unless certain basic things are not there.
Sanjay, what do you have to say on this?
Well, I mean, I think net neutrality is obviously a big issue. I mean, it's kind of like building, and I've been on the Delhi-Jaipur highway and basically saying we're going to build this freeway or this highway, and the only two exits are going to be in these two places, and no one can get on or off anywhere else. And at the end of the day, that's destructive. It doesn't create value. It's not collaborative. It doesn't make sense. So we have to find ways of actually, and net neutrality is one, IP protection and the legal infrastructure around that is another one. But eventually, I think the issues that also come on the table will be data security, right? I think about my parents in Delhi, and they're on a bunch of, forums and responding to ads and so on and so forth. And, I think about my dad and his savings account and how is he managing that information and where is that information sitting? It'll eventually get to data residency. Data residency is when you've got all this information that sits on the internet, where is it actually hosted? Is it sitting in Delhi or Goa or Bombay, or is it sitting outside in Seattle? And eventually that'll become a concern because people will kind of get up and say, I want to have control on where my data sits. And country becomes important because jurisdiction comes into play. And who's got the right to subpoena my information about my bank account, which happens to be somewhere?
The Digital India campaign can be complementary to the Make in India campaign and Made in India campaign, because the Prime Minister in one of the speeches before the verdict in 2014 spoke about manufacturing mobile phones.
Correct. But Make it in India is an important part. Make it in India in the digital area is also the research and development.
Yes.
And the startup, the young students, young faculty members, people just come out of universities, they should be involved in Make it in India. And in not exactly manufacturing, but you can make the innovative ideas. That has to be made in India.
Redefine the politics of communication, and he's using all the tools which younger generation aspire for, and he is evolving a new language. But what do you do to create an economy of innovation in a country like India? And this is a question for all of you, starting with you.
Well, I think the country of the atmosphere of innovation or the culture of innovation has a lot of different things. One is innovation has to accept that there will be failures along the way. That is just a fact. When people talk, whether you talk about Silicon Valley, you talk about Boston or any other regions, where you talk about Steve Jobs, he was ousted from his own company. So failure has to be accepted. That has to be accepted within the culture. And then there has to be financial resources given to people out there. And then you have to have intellectual property. Because you can't have innovation. When you innovate something, and I come ahead and say, I'm going to copy it, and I'm going to tweak it here, and I have no protection in the law. So you've got to have the acceptance of failure, you've got to have funding, and you've got to have rules and regulations that go with that.
Sanjay?
I think to the question you asked, I'd simply say three things. Education, I'll come back and talk about it. Education, infrastructure, and a culture of innovation, which I think is one of the best things I'm seeing now. And let me just spend 1 second in each of these, and I'll reflect on the IP, intellectual property protection. Look, I think when we think about manufacturing, we want to make sure we don't take too narrow a perspective. And we talked about Tesla. I think you brought up the topic earlier. When you think about Tesla, it's really a piece of software. When you think about it as a car, it's a software. It's the first car that is 100% designed, run, built on software. In fact, software is what the car is built around. It's not that software got added to the car, right? And if you drive it, you'll see it, you'll feel it, you can sense it. So now if you want it to be the next automobile manufacturer, you don't necessarily need to build automobiles. You need to build the software around it, right?
I think one thing lacking in Indian education system is the ability to become an entrepreneur. The faculty members are not really ready to teach that. Maybe they didn't have that kind of experience. So that has to be modified. So in order for somebody to start a company, start an enterprise or start a venture, there are many aspects. Just technology alone will not do. You need to be able to manage the finances. You have to manage people. You have to manage schedule. You have to make profit. All these things have to be brought into the education system. Unless some people go and study MBA, I mean, that may be one way, but that's a small part.
Still very strong in India because it's an intimate relationship.
But you don't need for all cases. So you do need to meet in person sometimes, but you do not need to really have. Most of the information now is treated on objective findings of the diagnostic information, and there is only few subjective which you can tell over the phone. I have a pain, I have stomach ache, I have a headache or whatever, that you can, but you touch and do something. The doctors can't really do much unless they go and do a MRI or a CAT scan or X-rays or blood test or some, that the doctors don't do it. It's done by somebody else. So the real information is, how do you get the right objective information to the doctor? He uses his expertise and he can make an assessment, and we can prescribe online. You can prescribe medicine online. You can prescribe for procedures to be done online. The digital system would be excellent for India, more than anybody, because the real reason is, in the remote villages, there are not that many doctors. Doctors are generally concentrated.
But you don't even have light, and you don't have mobile connectivity.
No, there is a lot of phone today. There is, I mean, whatever we have, we should, of course, the one.
No, I agree there are phones, but there is no data connectivity.
One of the things we need to do is to have the Wi-Fi capability for most of the places. I mean, maybe it may be too much to ask for this big India to have everywhere, Wi-Fi capability, but you can do in many parts of India, and that's the step India is going, and it will happen. That digital India would be a starting point for having those connectivity, and healthcare would be an ideal starting place. So I believe the healthcare initiative would be a good.
If you marry the idea as to what's happening in India, the first time the digital connectivity or the mobile connectivity in context of easing the work of the government came in the education sector. You had those open universities where the professors would be giving lectures and a lot of students would be listening to them. It did not succeed because society per se did not has given it the validity in the sense that this is cutting edge education. So unless and until you have that mindset, so with the tool, even you have the tool, it will not yield the fruit.
Now, there is always an acceptance problem, because people have to appreciate it, and it takes some time. That will help. That will happen, but that should not stop from making these things happen.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to the point that some of us raised on culture. I think culture is a really large part of digital, and in this case, digital India. And part of culture is the ability, and you mentioned this, the ability to take risks. And it's not even the personal ability to take the risks, and I've taken enough in my own life. It's actually the people around me to come and congratulate me and say, hey, Sanjay, so it didn't work out. Great. I think you learned some lessons, right? And have that peer-based acknowledgement that you're doing the right thing by innovating and knowing that half of this won't work out, the other half will work out. I actually think it's a fundamental cultural change that is required in to your point about thinking and saying, we're going to try a few things, 80% will work, 20% won't work. You know what? That's better than not trying anything and stepping back in time. And that cultural component is important. And I would add to the point you made, look, and I think this is another point you were making, medicine, if you think about the economics of medicine, is about distribution concentration. It's really what it comes down to, right?
And availability.
And which is part of the concentration of distribution, right? You concentrate, so then you've got these blind spots, if you will, that is not covered. And digital, and I understand that the infrastructure is yet to fully catch up there, but the power and potential of digital is fundamentally the right answer to addressing the problem of distribution, if you will, that is not covered. And digital, and I understand that the infrastructure is yet to fully catch up there, but the power and potential of digital is fundamentally the right answer to addressing the problem of distribution concentration, right? Because if you think about it, if you think about all the different levers we have as a modern economy of fixing that problem, I'm not talking about the quality of medicine, I'm not talking about the textbook, I'm talking about the availability and concentration of medicine in certain urban centers and not being available in a widespread economically and geographically dispersed basis. And actually digital is the way to address that.
And exactly in one area, for example, a qualified expert in one field, take oncology, in certain cancer specialty, he cannot be everywhere. India being so large, but you today, if you have a digital connection, you can actually pick his brain from remote places. Of course, you need connectivity, without which you can't do. But that ability is going to be available. That means a poor person can get access to a rich physician if the digital India succeeds.
Sanjay, the importance of an idea is in its ability to connect and convince. What do you think the Prime Minister, or at least the government, needs to do to ensure that the message gets connected broadly in terms of the service, which both Sanjay and Mohan spoke about, and its ability to reduce costs?
See, I think, we've been talking about culture. The culture, India is one of the youngest countries. Today, a kid in, take Raebareli, has access to almost the same information that a kid sitting in Chicago. So I don't see, because I travel to India a lot, I see maybe there might be some cultural nuances that might be different, but I think the culture is shifting in India, and it's shifting faster than most of us realize, because, I just see the entrepreneurship that's happening. And so, when you talk about healthcare, well, you can have hubs where you don't have, if you don't have bandwidth, then you can have hubs where you can have people come in. If the government can distribute so many, open so many new bank accounts, and you have these Aadhaar cards, why can't you have health records tied in with your Aadhaar card? I mean, Aadhaar card has been a big success. But in terms of what the government can do, because remember, the government is only a facilitator. The government in the United States did not create a digital revolution. It just, created an environment of innovation, a culture of innovation. And I think what the Prime Minister is probably coming here and saying, I'm coming to one of the most innovative parts of the world, and I'm saying is, India is open for business. We will create opportunities for you to jointly innovate. I think that's the message that he is probably trying to say, is that come and innovate. It's not about making in India, but let's create in India, create something together, innovate in India. You have a 1.2 billion market out there, but you also have a tremendous startup culture when you look at the hubs of Bangalore, etc. I mean, there's a reason that Cisco has its IoT sitting out there in Bangalore, etc. Not because the cost of living is there, because they see innovation flourishing out there.
The former Prime Minister often used the word unleash the animal spirit in the economy. Narendra Modi is speaking the same language, but in a slightly different way, and he has taken up different concepts and ideas. But do you feel that in a year's tenure he's had, the tangibles are being delivered? Because these were the ideas which were introduced in 2014 itself. Make in India, Digital India, Made in India, startups. So in tangibles, as part of the larger Indian community, and an entrepreneur in America. Do you think those tangibles are being delivered there?
Well,
Okay, I'll start with you first.
See, I think a year, I know we live in 160 characters at a time, but I think a year is still a relatively a short period, especially when you look at the challenges of India per se. Whether it's an infrastructure challenge, it's a cultural challenge, it's a legal challenge, etc. What he's trying to do is tell people that everything is possible. That's what he can do. Remember, he's not a business chief. He can just unleash and say everything is possible. He's coming here to say we can do these things. Now, yes, he's set up a lot of initiatives and done a lot of these things, but I would say the results will be known probably after he's gone as a prime minister. Hopefully he'll be there for a long period of time. That's not to say, but these things take a period of time. I mean, the culture of Silicon Valley.
Okay, let me ask you a supplementary. Do you feel that the Indian domestic industry has done its bit? Because the last time when the Prime Minister met the top 50 industrialists, he asked them to step up.
The Indian industry, I think the Indian entrepreneur is one of the best entrepreneurs in the world. I think what needs to also happen is the reforms that have been presented per se. When you talk about the land reforms, when you talk about the labor reforms, when you talk about the GST taxes, you got to also make it easy for the companies, the business people to also do business. If they run into stumbling blocks of multiple tax issues, etc., it's not, you can't tie one hand behind the back. But I would say when you look at these companies and you look at a 7% growth rate, given the turmoil the world is in, I would say that India has done good. I would say it has done great. That would be my prognosis.
Sanjay?
I probably have a little bit more positive outlook. By the way, I don't live in India, I live here in the Bay Area. The view I have of India, first off, for the last year, I mean, you look at the volatility that has existed around the globe, it's almost unbelievable, right? I mean, a year ago, we wouldn't have believed what's happening today in China, what's happening in Brazil, etc., around the world. So you want to actually start with that backdrop. And then as I think about India in that backdrop, and as I think about India as someone who lives here and frequently travels to India, I actually have a much more positive outlook. I actually think that from a business community perspective, some of the strides that have been made around capital allocation, around IP protection, around the advances that are happening around the infrastructure stuff, I think in all it's creating a very positive business climate, if you will. And I don't follow it completely, so I'm sure Mr. Modi has a lot to do with it, but I think the overall system has come a long ways. And so I have a very positive outlook of India, sitting from here, looking back, looking at it.
If you just look at only the big companies, things are slow in making changes. But the small companies, there is a large number of small companies which are really growing. That's the change for success. The growth of the country is not because of some 20, 30 big companies. It is for hundreds of thousands of small companies have to grow. And that is happening today. And Modi is giving leadership to that opportunity. Even take startups. Startups, of course, when we talk about startups, we always think of technology companies. But startups, one startup success creates hundreds of small companies. So it's not just a big company, billion-dollar market companies. That's not the really, I mean, that is good, but you want 50 people company, 100 people company, or maybe even 20 people companies. The US is really has close to 10 million small businesses. That is the real success of the United States. In India, what we need is such small businesses, success and creating jobs. And I think that is happening, and I have a very, very positive outlook for India.
So let me wind up this discussion by asking you, and this question will be for all of you, what does Narendra Modi needs to do in the next 6 months to a year time to popularize this idea of digital India as an empowering tool?
In my opinion, he should continue to do what he is doing. He has to work like a preacher rather than the person who builds things. And he's doing the right thing. He should continue to
like a visionary and not a manager.
Yeah, exactly. He should be a visionary, and he is. And that he should continue to do, with, even though the media or whoever asks the tough questions, and he should continue to
Like
do
a visionary and not a manager.
Yeah, exactly. He should be a visionary, and he is. And that he should continue to do, with, even though the media or whoever asks the tough questions and says it's not enough, that's okay. That's a very good thing to have. However, he has to continue what he is doing, such that the young people should be converted into doing things.
Sanjay?
Look, I would say the trick to any sort of economic expansion, and I think the work that's going on here is, I would call it think big, start small, scale quickly. And if you think about that principle, I think the Prime Minister has to set the vision for something that's big and grand and lead the way. I think very quickly we need to see a set of empowered officials and industrialists and entrepreneurs, to the point you made, that can actually build things quickly and start small and show proof and show success. And then once you have the model together, then you need the infrastructure, the legislation, the business climate to actually be able to scale quickly. So if you think about think big, start small, and scale quickly, that might be a recipe to how we approach this going forward with them.
Sanjay?
I think both of them have covered excellent points. I would say that bandwidth is a big issue in India, and that's something that he's talking about. He's made it a point to talk about this drop calls. If you notice, he's been talking about
The whole matter is sub judice. We have not been able to solve the issue of towers in residential areas because you have conflicting, competing medical studies.
I know. So my point is, obviously, at a higher level, bandwidth is going to be a very, very critical function for him. And then, just like he's doing here in Silicon Valley, maybe he should have a conversation with the technology visionaries of India, the small upcoming, as he talked about, where the 20% company, the next Tesla, the next Google is going to be coming in, maybe engaging with them. He's got a startup fund out there, sitting there and recognizing some of these people. They have this India Science Congress, etc. How about doing something for the startup folks out there? So we talked about changing the culture. Let's have a conversation with the next Mark Zuckerberg of India, sitting in somewhere in India, whether it could be in Bhopal, Pune, etc. Let's have that discussion maybe next year around.
So thank you all of you for participating in this debate. So this was the second edition of our roundtable with NewsX, NewsX, and we'll be back with more. This is Karthikeya Sharma from San Francisco for NewsX.